Hello and welcome to session 33 of the Abomination Vault's campaign diaries. Today, our group will be facing down Volluk for the second time. Last time they ran away, hopefully this time they achieve victory. Unlike last time, this time we have activated free archetype in the campaign, so they've all got little bits of buffs that may or may not be useful. After the fight, I'll run through whether they helped or not, because that might be interesting. The strategy they have come up with is to burst into the room, spread out, and throw bombs, hit with AoEs, and just burst the guy down, which is a sound plan. In theory, it should work, but let's see if the dice agree. So we began initiative with the door closed. Volluk wasn't aware he was in a fight yet, which gave our players a full round to prepare. They drew bombs, May activated her Stoked Flame stance and cast Shielded Arm, and Ornifex cast Bless and began to expand it outwards. And then Gorgon opened the doors. Sesto kicked off the violence by throwing in one of the bombs. It missed, but the splash damage still affected him, and he did take extra damage because of his weakness to splash damage. So in theory, the plan works. When it came to entering the room, though, Ornifex wanted to use that necklace of fireballs, so they were a little apprehensive about actually going in and decided to sort of throw stuff through the doorway for now. I played Volluk pretty nasty in this fight. As not just a boss fight, but the final boss in the first 3 books, I wanted to have him be particularly nasty, particularly clever, and use his abilities to the best of his ability. So as soon as the door was open, he blasted the group with a Vomit Swarm spell. This hit most of the party, leaving Sesto and Gorgon sickened, which is something that reduced their combat capabilities throughout the fight. And then he cast Shield on himself. They did begin pushing into the room, hiding at the edges so that Ornifex could angle a fireball to cover most of the room but not hit them. And Milo managed to throw another bomb, hitting another dose of splash damage, and they were outpacing his healing. Then it got to Ornifex's turn, and she plucked off the big fireball from the necklace, threw it into the room, and he critically succeeded, so no damage. But she took off a second bead and threw that one into the room, and he critically succeeded and took no damage. This is a little bit of a teachable moment for our group. You should probably start using these items when you get them, because they don't scale up like a character does. They come with their own DC and the damage is relatively low, so when you get them, you need to just use them at the appropriate levels. There's no point hoarding magic items because they don't stay powerful for very long. And also when it comes to boss fights, probably don't use these kind of items on a boss. Use them to trivialize a smaller goon encounter. Gorgon wasted actions trying to remove Sickened and failing to do so, and then they began to realize that the plan might not be as effective as they thought it was, because Sesto threw a bomb and critically missed, which means no splash damage and no weakness triggered. May threw hers and also critically missed. The plan was sound in theory. Throw bombs and it doesn't matter if you miss, you still get the splash damage, but if you critically miss, you don't get a splash damage. In a normal encounter, this wouldn't be a super big issue, but because Volluk's AC is so high, and Sesto, May, most of the party are not proficient in bombs and not dexterity characters, they're rolling with a +1 or a +2 to hit a 25 AC, meaning they need a 14 on the dice at least. They thought this attack bonus would be okay because they only need a miss, but Volluk's AC is really high, so they needed a high roll to even get a miss, and that kind of brought the plan to a halt. Volluk was initially worried when he realized what their plan was, but after the fireballs failing, after multiple bombs failing to do anything, he suddenly felt a little bit relieved and went back to his confident self.
You had me worried for a second. I forgot how incompetent you were.
Rude.
In a little petty act of vengeance, he cast Worm's Repast on Milo again. This blasted him with a lot of damage and triggered that persistent damage. And then he moved into May's space. This was both because he wanted to hurt May, but also because he was now clocking onto the fact they wanted to use splash damage and AoEs, and if he stood in somebody's space, they have to decide whether they want to hurt their friend. Milo fired off his wand of Force Barrage because they thought after the previous battle that he was weak to force damage. He's not. But it did still hurt him a little bit. Ornifex joined them in the room and began to pump out whatever defensive spells she could muster. And then Gorgon started to attack. Gorgon has found himself missing a lot. I don't think it's his build, I think it's just his look, but he's kind of turned into a glimpse of redemption spammer because that's where he's getting the most use out of his character. Sesto managed to do a bit more damage, but he wasn't using AoEs, so the damage was basically just offsetting the fast healing. In a very nice bit of rolling, May managed to land both of her flurry attacks on him. This combines the damage and then applies the resistances, so this did manage to bypass a fair bit of resistance, and I think this is the first time this has actually happened or been needed in the campaign. So it was very nice to see. And this resulted in a pretty substantial hit from May. The worms were still eating away at Milo, so she did spend the time to hand off a potion to him. As part of me being particularly nasty with Volluk, he cast Suggestion on Ornifex. He knew that Ornifex was their healer. He knew how crucial she was to keeping everybody up and alive, especially with the persistent damage he could put out. So he wanted her gone. Ornifex critically failed her save against this spell, which means he was in control for 1 hour. But the team screamed to use their hero point, so she did, and it turned to just a normal failure, which is still a minute. And a minute is a long time in combat. That can be the entire fight. Since Volluk's Suggestion has to be something not particularly detrimental and has to kind of make sense to the person they're suggesting it to, he told Ornifex to hurry, go get help. You guys need help. As a previous 5th edition GM, I'm always kind of used to spells like this having multiple outs to them, whether that be repeat saving throws or damage destroying the effect. It always kind of surprises me when Pathfinder doesn't have these. It commits, which I like. I like that it's letting you have these powerful spells and they're not just bypassed by, oh, you've lost concentration, or one tiny bit of damage is broken on the character. These spells are dangerous and feel dangerous when someone has them. However, being out of action for a full minute is essentially removing that character from the fight, and Volluk was pretty selective in choosing their healer. The group did not think they stood much of a chance without Ornifex, so they did try and challenge me on this one a little bit. They made claims such as she can't move through Tiny because she's not an ally anymore. She is still an ally, she's not done anything to remove herself from the party. They claimed that leaving the fight at all would be detrimental because that would be leaving her allies, but again, that's a bit of a stretch that I didn't agree with. And quite surprisingly to me, May asked that if she fully just threatens Ornifex with violence, would that break it? To that one, I said yes. If May threatens to hurt or kill Ornifex because she's leaving, that would, but I did question whether May would actually do that. To me, May has never seemed like the kind of character that would be so shocked by Ornifex leaving she would physically go over and beat her and threaten her to get back in the fight. That felt a little out of character and felt a bit meta-y, as though they're trying to come up with any solution to get her back. But while I play my villains very mean, I as a GM are usually siding with my players, and I knew fully that it'd be pretty shit to just have Ornifex leave the fight for a full minute. Ornifex's player would not enjoy that, and I want her to enjoy herself, so I of course had a plan to stop that from happening. And I actually directly expressed to my players, let this play out, it's not going to be as bad as you think it is, I have a plan. So once it got to Ornifex's turn, she fled. She ran to the above floor to seek help. Bye-bye, cleric. Once she was gone, the rest of the party went into full panic mode. They missed their attacks, they began focusing more on defensive abilities than offensive abilities. My group, as we've seen in the past, spiral if they think they're going to lose, and this was definitely one of those occasions. They didn't feel confident without the very impressive healing of Ornifex. As the remaining party tried their best but made very little progress, Volluk cast a 3-action Darkness spell, which I admit is a very bitchy thing for me to do. They were already missing most of their attacks, and this just compounded the issue. But it was a huge advantage to Volluk, and made sense that he would do that. With his fast healing, if he can stall out a fight for as long as possible, he's just going to keep healing. It's going to be very good for him to do that. I partially regret casting it, because while it was a huge benefit, it did kind of suck to play in as a player, missing all those attacks, having flat checks on everything, having to look for him in the darkness. I will admit it wasn't super fun for the players. I suppose you need to find that middle ground. It's why I cast it about halfway through the fight instead of opening with this darkness bubble. When we got back to Ornifex's turn, I had kind of gotten what I wanted out of it. I'd removed the cleric for a round and showed the party how scary that can be. So now I was ready for her to come back. I said that the risks of traversing the Gauntlight on your own is very dangerous, and that would be enough to be countered as a detrimental effect, and as such that broke through the suggestion spell and she became able to control herself again. So she hurried her ass back down the stairs. She managed to get just close enough to get a few of the party members into the Bless aura, which was definitely useful given their current situation. So while the party struggled with the darkness and Ornifex stared in, they weren't having a super good amount of fun. But what was very fun for them was Sesto casting a Fire Breath and Volluk rolling a natural 1. So this did a huge amount of damage to him as it doubled and then also took the weakness to AoE damage. This did give the players the hope that they might succeed. They had their healer back and they were doing pretty good damage. In response though, Volluk hid. He went into stealth and hurried through the darkness into an area where they didn't know where he was. They spent multiple rounds actually using Seek to try and find him in the darkness. Often someone would find him, but it would be the last action, so they couldn't use an action to point him out to the rest of the party. Volluk basically wanted to drag this fight out and heal as much as he could. The party ended up spending a real-life hour in this darkness bubble fighting Volluk. Sometimes they would get lucky and they would land a hit, or sometimes a Fire Breath spell would manage to clip him and do a big chunk of damage. Eventually, the steady flow of damage was outpacing his fast healing, and he was getting pretty low. He did regularly fire off his own nasty spells, so the party were taking a bunch of damage and using lots of heals to keep that up, and using lots of heals to keep themselves up. Finally, a natural 20 from Milo got him really low. Gorgon followed this up with his own strike that was infused with electricity damage thanks to his Jolt Coil. In response to getting pretty low, Volluk rushed into Ornifex's space and riddled her with maggots. Critical failure on the saving throw meant she took double damage and Ornifex dropped to the ground, dying. He then immediately used another action to do the same thing to Sesto, and he only stayed alive because of the glimpse of redemption from Gorgon. Finishing his turn, he rushed away from the group, trying to find somewhere in the darkness to hide. The group chased after him though. They rushed after him, and between a critical hit from May that set him on fire, and an electric arc from Gorgon, they finally felled Volluk. At least, they kind of did. In the darkness of the spell, they didn't see several maggots crawling along the ground and escaping into various nooks and crannies. So while they did celebrate killing Volluk, it's only temporary. He will be back. Soon after though, the darkness orb dissipated and the group stood victorious. Regardless of whether he will be back, this is still a very good achievement for our players, and I'm very proud of them. They spent some much needed time healing and began to look around the room.
This isn't it, right? The blast is still going to happen, surely. We need to find out where it is.
Yeah, I guess so. I'd hope there was like a path from here to there.
They searched his desk and found several things of note. Firstly, they found 3 very detailed maps of the first 3 floors. This included secret rooms, and they discovered that they'd only actually missed one secret room, which was in the Temple of the Canker, and it's that room that has a lot of very good and very useful information. They found some spell scrolls, including one for Worm's Repast, which is a new spell they can learn themselves now if they study this scroll. And they found the Lantern of Empty Light. After a discussion of who should have this eventually went to Ornifex, who actually drew some really cute fan art of her, who actually drew some really cute artwork of herself with the lantern, which is great. Upon taking the lantern and identifying it though, Ornifex finally remembered what all of the symbology they'd seen throughout the dungeon was referring to. As you look at this lantern and start to hold it, you suddenly have an epiphany almost. You think back and suddenly so many things you've seen click into place. The mossy skull iconography, the swamp. You suddenly remember why you've had that itching feeling in the back of your head that you know what that iconography means, because it's Nimbaloth. It's the outer god Nimbaloth, also known as the Empty Death.
The iconography in this room?
Throughout the entire dungeon, from the shrine on the top floor all the way through, whenever you've been seeing those mossy skulls, that's the religious iconography of Nimbaloth. She's the god of will-o-wisps and is said to be able to see through their eyes. She eats souls, and she takes souls out of the River of Souls and eats them. And when she does, they're gone forever. No afterlife, no resurrection. They don't go back into the loop. The words empty death ring in your head. You've heard that before. You specifically.
That is not good. Okay, I will inform the others of the god Nimbaloth. And, everything you just told me now.
Wait. So, does that mean Belcor worshipped her? Did she build all this iconography into this Gauntlight, or was this here before her?
Could be a follower of Nimbaloth.
What does that mean?
What does it mean to follow any god or goddess?
Well, I mean, like, what kind of edicts does she expect from her followers? Does anyone know?
You can make another religion check. You're not entirely knowledgeable of this god. It's not even one that's public knowledge. You know their areas of concern are despair, ghosts, and swamps. You know that their sacred colors are green and white. And you don't recall what the edicts are, but you remember that the god is so distant and uncaring that there are no anathema.
So you can't do anything to make them upset.
Because they just don't care about you enough.
But it does make sense, like if those are things that they like this place is built in a location that might be considered holy. It's like this entire place is a shrine. I wonder if the Gauntlight functions. What if the siphon?
Right?
Yeah, like what if the siphon or whatever, like the thing that they use to burn out someone to fire the Gauntlight, what if that's a creation of Nimbeloff? Or maybe it's...
Yeah, I was having the same thought. It's too much of a coincidence, right? Using people as batteries, shoot souls.
Yeah, maybe it's like, oh, here, maybe it's like a ritual casting. Maybe they're sacrificed in a ritual to lend some of her power or in some kind of machination. Which is bad. Like, if this is... I don't want this to turn out into us having to fight an outer goddess. That would be bad.
Yes, that would, I think that'd be above our pay grade.
Their discussion was interrupted by a tortured scream coming through the eastern wall. Clearly there was a secret door there, they found it, they slid it open, and as they finally found Rock's missing NPC Lily bound to a table and being tortured, we ended the session. Volluk remained very nasty this session, and he will be back. I played him more defensively this time, trying to take advantage of ways he could make sure his fast healing is effective, so he wasn't blasting off quite as many devastating damage spells. And I'm not sure if they would have survived if I had done that. He is an intelligent learning man though, and in their next showdown, I think I might swap back to full offense and see how that goes for them. So how did our archetypes help? Well, the long and short of it is not at all. They got a +2 to initiative from May's Scout archetype. That did help. It meant Volluk ended up around halfway through the group, instead of being the first one to act. But he's not undead, so Undead Slayer, useless. Ghost Hunter, useless. Exorcist, useless. Orn Effects did create a batch of medical items using her Herbalist, but she didn't distribute them or use them herself. And she didn't use the Lay on Hands focus spell, so the Blessed One archetype also didn't come into play. Gorgon did regularly use his shield, but Volluk is kind of smart enough to not target the AC of Gorgon when he had his shield raised. He was using mostly saving throw spells, so that also didn't come up much. So basically, it didn't really change anything, and the reason they won was because of their knowledge, the dice, and their ability to have a preemptive plan going into this fight. However, I don't want to say the free archetype was useless. They're still very useful abilities and effects, and I think most of them were not utilized because they're new and the players don't know how to use them, when to use them, probably just forgot about them as well. I do think in the long run, activating free archetype was definitely the correct thing to do. But that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed, then please like and subscribe and comment letting me know how your Volluk fights went and if your party had to do this repeat battle. It really feels like if you throw that darkness spell just before he dies, then it's likely he's gonna live. I do need to consider where I'm going to bring him up again next though. Probably in a big, nice return of the Gauntlight firing. You can find my usual links in the description for Discord, for Blue Sky, for whatever. But that is it for now. I shall see you soon. Bye-bye.